Hi everybody, it's John back again with another model inbox review. Today I'm looking at a motorcycle. This is going to be a first for me in many ways because the model itself is actually an Aoshima 1/1200 scale Yamaha 1200cc VMAX motorcycle, and it's not just the first Aoshima kit I've ever built, but it's also going to be the first motorcycle kit I've ever built. That's not 100% true, but it will be the first motorcycle kit I've ever finished, because I did actually build an Airfix BSA motorcycle, the 250C15 Series 3 kit, back in my teenage years. And it's not really the same type of kit as this, and I didn't do a fantastic job of it, and I never built another motorcycle since that. My brother built quite a few motorcycles. He quite liked motorbikes. He rode motorbikes when he was young. I only had really a couple to go in and out of work when I was in the 20s and 30s really. I didn't really have much in the way of motorbike scene, but this particular kit that I'm building is actually a present that I bought for a friend of mine who actually had one of these beasts of a machine. When he was, I don't know how old he was actually, but it was probably about 15 years ago. And the Yamaha VMAX 1200cc motorcycle was an absolute beast. To give you an idea of the stats, the speed that this thing was capable of, it was built for the drag racing scene, but it was also a road-worthy drag racing motorbike all over the world. The bike actually had 140 brake horsepower, which is the same amount of power as your average 2-litre turbo diesel Mondeo. But of course it's in a motorbike. This thing could do 0 to 60 in around 3 seconds, and it had a top speed of something like 165 miles an hour. The only problem with it was that, according to the critics, the Yami VMAX had very little in the way of braking ability, as its brakes were woefully inadequate, and it was a bit of a pig to handle because the bike was quite top heavy, and it suffered from what was called speed wobble, especially when braking, and it was quite hairy to keep a hold of the bike when it was cornering, because its cornering ability wasn't very good. So first of all, like all model in box reviews, we'll go into the boxing history. I'll have to try and apologise in ahead of time, because the boxing history on this bike is actually quite complicated, because you have to understand that the Yamaha VMAX 1200 was released in 3 specific different variants, and it was released in 4 particular versions of the bike over the years between 1985 and 2007, when the bike's last iteration, if you like, was released on the open market. The bike was originally released in 1985, and this was the standard Yami VMAX 1200 motorcycle release that the bike was released in 1985, and Aoshima released a model of this bike in 1/12 scale in the year 2000. So this is a 2000 release boxing of the bike, and it's in its original format as it was released in 1985. So that's the first model that was released in 2000. Then you go later in the year in 2000, when Yamaha actually produced what was called the black version of the original bike. Now, this particular version was only available in black. All the side panniers, the tank, the mudguards, and even the exhaust system was all in black, but it was exactly the same bike that you got in the standard format. But it was just a black version of the bike. It was supposed to appeal to a different type of rider who wanted something a little bit more sinister, if you like. But the bike is identical in every way, shape and form except in colour to the original release bike, and it was released in the same year in 1985, but this model was also released later in the same year by Aoshima in the year 2000. Then Yamaha produced what was called an export version. Again, this bike was released a year later in 1986. You can see on the boxing there, the VMAX 1986 export version, and this bike was first exported to America and then later in the European market. And Aoshima produced this kit in 2001. And the major differences were, I think the original VMAX was only available in two colours, that was silver and black, but for the export market they produced the bike in I think 6 different colours. On top of the original silver and black, I think these were red, purple, yellow, blue, green and white. And obviously you can build any one of those colours, but Aoshima produced this particular boxing in red, and the plastic for the various the various panel parts that are red, I think was moulded in red plastic. Which was a nice touch by Aoshima. So that's a 2000 release of the US export, later European export model of the Yami 1200 VMAX motorcycle. Then in 2001, Aoshima released what was called the third distinct different variant. This is the first distinct different variant of the Yamaha 1200 VMAX. This was the custom variant, and as you can see, there are two distinct different things about this particular bike that stick out straight away. The first is that the front forks were slightly elongated. I think they were only about 3 inches longer, but they were set at a slightly different angle to give the bike a chopper appeal look to it. And there were also an additional stretched exhaust system that gave the bike a much more sort of custom looking feel to the bike as well. It had a slightly different seat, I believe, and various different panels attached to the side of the bike. The battery cover there, I think, was colour coded in a different colour. It also had a little windshield, and it also had a protective cover for your legs that went over the top of the exhaust manifold mount at the top there, on top of the you can see it on the corner of the front of the seat there. This thing here, just in case you're interested, this was a feature of the Yamaha VMAX, and this is one of the reasons why it was called a VMAX. It was called a V-boost system. You had one of each of these, one on each side, and it basically it was a bit like putting an additional set of carburetors onto the bike's inlet system. A bit like putting twin carbs onto a car, and it increased the power ratio of the bike, the power rating of the bike by an enormous amount. I think the original power rating on the motorcycle's engine, which was a 1200cc touring bike engine, similar in style to the Honda Goldwing, but it was Yamaha's version of the bike engine. It went from about 95 horsepower to 140, which obviously gave this thing an enormous amount of acceleration. It was absolutely breathtaking. The acceleration on this bike was absolutely incredible. So that was the 2001 release of the Aoshima Yamaha VMAX Custom. And then in 2001, they released another version of the custom bike. But this time, this bike was called the Yamaha VMAX Super Trap. And the Super Trap was basically the same as the custom bike, but it had a Super Trap exhaust system. You can see the exhaust system here. It's a little bit shorter and thinner, and I think the idea behind it was to try and trap more back pressure in the exhaust system and give the bike a little bit more torque. And I think this was the version of the bike that was more often used in the drag racing circuits, especially in America, where the bike really did sell very well. So that was 2001's release from Aoshima of the Yamaha VMAX Custom Super Trap. Then in 2002, Yamaha released the second iteration of the Yamaha VMAX bike, the 2001 export version, and this was the first time that Yamaha actually changed the spec of the actual bike's not power plant, but it was the bike's handling ability. They actually increased the ratio and the capacity of the braking system to make the brakes work a little bit better. I don't know how much effect it had on the braking of the bike, but they also increased the width of the front forks. The width of the front forks was increased, I believe, by about 10 mm, and this gave the bike a little bit more of a sturdy handling ability, especially when braking on a bend, which the bike was heavily criticised for prior to this date. And this model was released on the market by Aoshima in 2002. Anyway, that's the 2002 rendition. Then in 2009 we have the third iteration, and this was the final edition of the Yamaha VMAX 1200cc model. This was released in 2007, but the Aoshima model was not released until 2009. Now this is basically the model that I've got, but it's not the boxing I've got. But it's exactly the same kit inside the VMAX final edition version. But the model boxing that I've got is one of the later variants that was released after 2015, I believe. So that's 2009's Aoshima 1/12 scale Yamaha VMAX. And then in 2010, Yamaha, the VMAX export version of the same bike, the 2007 final edition, was released by Aoshima. The boxing of it by Aoshima was released in 2010, and this is exactly the same bike that you had before, but it's in the black variant instead of the standard variant with the chrome pipes and the colour-coded tank cover and panniers for the battery there. But the bike was identical. Quintessentially, the bike was identical in every iteration and every version that you actually found. But Aoshima released this kit in 2010. Then in 2011, Aoshima released what was called the 2004 variant of the Yamaha VMAX, and they did this in, I believe, 4 different colours. I think there were 4 different boxings of this particular model. One was in red, I believe there was a blue one, there was a black one and a white one. And they were all colour-coded parts to produce the 4 different colours released, and they're all released in 2011. Now then, little one-off limited edition run here from Aoshima. They actually produced in 2012 a highly modified model of the Yamaha 1200 VMAX to coincide with a manga cartoon series that was being released in Japan called Katie, I believe it's Hero, but it could be Zero, but I believe it's Katie Hero. And she rode a Yamaha VMAX motorcycle in the TV series, and this ran for the majority of the TV series, but I think this boxing was only available in Japan. That was released in 2012. And then in 2013, Aoshima went right back to basics, where they released a model of the original bike in the original colours. I believe this bike is white. The original release was in white. And I think this was just a commemoration of the fact that the model had been on the market for a number of years, and they just went back and released the original version of the kit. So that was 2013. Then in 2016, and I believe this is the boxing of the bike that I've got, they released the final edition Yami VMAX, not 2007 variant from Yamaha, but this boxing by Aoshima was released in 2016. I know, sorry, it's complicated, but I can't do anything about that. And then in 2017, they released, I believe this is another case where you had 4 different boxings comprising 4 different colours of the bike. I've definitely seen a boxing of a 2017 release. I've seen photos of this bike in bright psychedelic purple, as well as this reddish sort of tone colour. Incidentally, the bike that my friend had was this particular bike. It was this bike. And I'll be doing a model of this bike, and I've actually had to go out and try and order some paint to cover the colours for the mudguards and the tank cover there. The actual tank for the Yami VMAX was under the seat. The tank cover there was just for aesthetic sort of looks. But the other 2 colours I'm not quite sure, but I do believe they were blue and yellow. But don't quote me. Definitely a psychedelic purple and this red colour. That was 2017, and I believe that was the last offering of the Yami VMAX. This is actually a picture of my friend's bike. I thought I'd give you an idea what the bike looked like. one of the things that's interesting is that the battery cover panniers there are actually silver, and on the majority of the motorbikes boxings from Aoshima they're black, and the transfers that go with them are for a black pannier. So I'm going to try and see if I can use the transfers that I've got in the box and see if it's all right with my friend. I think he says just, you know, build it as best you can to look like my old bike. But I do believe he does miss the bike. But he's getting on in years now, and I think if he bought one of these again, I think he'd probably kill himself. But it is quite an unusual looking motorbike. It does look extremely mean, and it does look like it's a badass machine, doesn't it? But that's the Yamaha 1200 VMAX, released by Yamaha originally in 1985, and the final rendition was released in 2007. So what I want to do now is just quickly, I just want to move this over a little tiny bit and then bring the camera down as quickly as I can to the table, and then go through the bits and pieces like we normally do. So I've had a quick look. There's my friend there with his bike. Lovely bike, isn't it? Must admit, I wouldn't mind a piece of that myself. Anyway, and then we'll take that out of there, and I'll put the parts into the lid because I want to go through the parts. There's something I want to say about this particular bike, because my brother built quite a lot of motorbikes. He built quite a lot of motorbikes indeed, in fact, and a number of them were Tamiya motorcycles in 1/12 scale, and I do remember seeing him building quite a few motorcycles when I was a teenager. And I must admit, I know Aoshima have had a bit of a name for themselves in the 60s and 70s when they were producing some quite god-awful kits, but I believe somebody in the company must have given themselves a good shake, because most of the Aoshima models that were released after 1990 are pretty much the same quality as Tamiya, and this bike model is no exception. In actual fact, I would be very surprised if it was any less good quality than Tamiya. I think they've used Tamiya as a benchmark, I think, to produce a decent model of a motorbike. Now this kit actually builds up in 17 steps. And we'll go through the steps I'm not going to go pandemonially through it, but you know, because instruction leaflets are pretty much a muchness. One of the issues I've got with this, although the model, I did actually order this kit from abroad, so it's not really an issue for me. A lot of it is in Japanese, because the bikes are made in Japan. The models, all Aoshima kits are made in Japan. There is a bit of English here, but the majority of the plans are in Japanese. There is, like usual with kits of this quality, you get a parts plan on the back, and it's quite comprehensive, but it doesn't tell you what the transparency parts or the black parts or chrome parts are, because the bike comes in two different colours, chrome and black. The kit does, sorry. But I'm always a fan of parts plans. I think they're brilliant for IDing parts, especially when you can't see the damn numbers on the sprues, which is fantastic. And then you open the first page of the instruction leaflet, and you've got a decal guide, placement guide here, and that gives you an idea of what the bike model is going to look like. Yeah, and the part numbers corresponding to the opposite side, there we go. So it just gives you an idea where all the decals go. And then here you've got 3 pictures here on showing you how to cut the decals out from the sheet, placing them in water, and then using what they would consider to be, it's almost like a toothpick tool to place the decals in place. But I always tend to use a small paintbrush, because there's very little chance that you can damage a decal with a paintbrush. But I think you can damage a decal with a metal tool of that type. There's also instructions here advising you to use certain tools like tweezers and clippers. They advise you to use plastic cement, and there's a picture there of a liquid style cement. It's typically similar to that used sold by Tamiya. And there's also, I think that's a drilling tool. No, sorry, it's a small screwdriver. So yeah, there are some screws in this particular model. which is quite nice. So you do need a screwdriver. But basically, the run of the build is you start off by building the front and rear tyre with the alloy wheels and the brake discs, and then you're building the front and rear forks and swinging arm there. The bike's actually shaft drive. There's no chain on this bike. It's a shaft driven motorcycle. A lot of chrome parts in this kit as well. And then in section 5 you're building the engine through section 6, 7 and 8. It's all to do with the engine build. You can see there's quite a lot of detail going into this engine. As I said, the model is 1/12 scale, so it's going to be quite sizable. And then in section 9 you're basically just fitting the carburetors into place, and the magneto cover and some other fittings there onto the top of the engine. And then in section 10 you're building the frame with, I think this is the petrol tank, believe it or not. And then the frame fits either side of the engine. You've got some other bits and pieces here that go in place. And then in section 11 you're actually putting the radiator together and the fittings that go onto the radiator from the engine. And that's showing you how the radiator fits together. That's like a sub-assembly prior to this part here. And then in section 12, I'm getting quite excited about this. It looks like quite a taxing build, which I quite like. I quite like the challenge. And then you've got the first of the what you call the actuating parts. You've actually got 2 springs with this kit, and they're proper working metal springs that go over the dampers there in section 12 sub-assembly, and then you fit them either side of the back of the swinging arm into the frame, which you can see quite clearly there. And then there's some bits and bobs that you have to fit into place as well. I think the footrests and the like. And then in section 13 you've got the exhaust system to put into place with the centre stand, which is quite nice. That looks quite good. And then section 14 you're fitting the seat, the mudguard handlebar and the rear lamp shroud. And then there's the tank cover, which doesn't actually cover the tank at all. This is interesting here because I do know this from my friend. You're actually building part A, is that A14, which is actually a petrol tank on top of the petrol tank cover there. But my friend definitely said to me, because I did query this with him, because he said to me that the Yamaha VMAX was one of the first motorcycles to place a tank under the front section of the seat. So what that is, I have no idea, because that should be here, and the battery was, I think, under the tank. He said that the petrol tank was definitely under the seat, because there were a lot of lessons learned with the VMAX. One of them was how to reduce the centre of gravity on a racing bike, because the VMAX, the only reason why it was able to go around corners at all was because it had a very low centre of gravity. I said before that the bike was quite top heavy. That wasn't true actually. The bike it had the feeling of being top heavy, but most of the weight was actually below the seat. And the reason why you felt uneasy was because it didn't handle very well. The bike was such a difficult bike to get round corners. It was slightly better when they got the 2004 rendition out, when they increased the width of the front forks, but it still wasn't a fantastic motorcycle to ride. It wasn't a nice ride, but it was a very thrilling one. But what that is, I have no idea what they think it is either, but we'll obviously put it in because you'll probably need it in place to put the tank cover on. But the tank on this bike was definitely in the seat, and the battery was definitely under there. So that's quite interesting. And then you've also got the rear lamp assembly here, which is a sub-assembly which goes onto the rear mudguard, which is quite easy to understand. Section 15, you put in the partition section into the seat. There's some extra fittings, and then you're putting what's called the V booster system into place. Obviously you'll need to put one of those on one side and one on the other. And then in section 16 you're putting the dials, handlebars, assembly together and all the clocks, which is quite nice. And then 17, sorry, there's actually 19 steps, not 17. You're putting the main headlamp assembly together, placing the handlebars onto the front of the forks. And section 18 you're putting other fittings on, like the gear change, footrests, rear footrests. And then section 19 you're doing the same on the other side. Yeah, you got a gear change on. I think section 18 is a gear change, and section 19 is the foot brake. Yeah, so that's basically the instructions. They're quite comprehensive. The bike does seem to have quite a lot happening with it. I'll just put that in there. Decals. I don't want to take these decals out of the plastic, but I've got some of the plastic bags opened up so you can have a look at the parts properly. But the decals look quite nice as well. I think those decals, the circular decals, I think it's something to do with the front wheels, the wheel rims. You've got a nice decal there for the front tank, which of course I won't use, but I might keep hold of that because it might come in handy with something else or for something else. And then you've got a dial decal, which, yeah, that's quite nice. I'll probably use that. And some other decals that go on the bike here and there. Yamaha, VMAX written there. Yeah, that looks quite nice. It's a nice decal sheet as well. It feels, and you know, the actual decals they're very bright and vibrant, which is good. I'll go through the black parts first, because the black parts are probably the parts that are least interesting, but they carry quite a lot of detail. There's quite a lot of sprues in this kit as well. The first sprue I want to have a look at, you've actually got Yamaha written in there. It's quite crisp, isn't it? And there's also VMAX written in there, which I'm probably going to paint instead of using a decal for that. That'll be interesting to get that painted up. Then you've got the rear disc brake, and that is really nicely cast. The alloy wheels, you've got the front wheel there and the back wheel. It's quite a hefty centre hub there, quite interesting. And then you've got the front disc brakes, which are slightly larger than the back disc brakes, and there's two of those on each side. And they're nicely casted as well. The parts on this kit are really nicely cast, I must admit. There's no flash anywhere on this model whatsoever. And the parts are really nice, as you can see. You can see the quality of the parts. Very, very nice indeed. I was very impressed when I saw the parts on this. Even the small, thin, narrow bits. They're beautifully put together, beautifully designed. And they look very good indeed. This is a sprue. The majority of the parts on here are to do with the engine. You can see the engine there, that's quite nice. Side parts. I think that's the sump and the top. Gearbox, that's the gearbox on there. That's the top. You've got the tops of the cylinders. The bike was a 4-cylinder V. It was a twin set of 2 sets of cylinders in V form, so it was a 4-cylinder bike with 2 twin sets of cylinders in V form. Very nice. That's a magneto cover. They're quite nicely casted as well. Very nice indeed. The parts are they look very, very good. Very impressed with the parts in this bike. Just have a look at these. There's quite a few sprues here in black. Got a pile of the frame here. That's quite nicely casted and moulded. You don't have to have a look at the other side, it's virtually the same, it's just the opposite side. Very nice indeed. As I said before, I think the parts on this bike are as good as a Tamiya part kit. I think they're very well. The other thing that's nice there is that's the top of the head. That's like the shroud for the. Is that the shroud for the rear? Yeah, I think that's the shroud for the rear tail light. And you'll be able to paint the back plate of that up and then stick the the transparency part into place, and you'll be able to paint the inside of the transparency part in red. These are the pannier parts and mudguards. Again, they're quite nice, nicely moulded. There's no flash. I'm absolutely astounded by the quality and cleanliness of the parts on this bike. It's really nice. Got some more parts there with some nice detail. Look at that. Very, very nice. I'm really impressed. The seat looks good. Very impressed indeed. There's some covers there. The moulding's really good. Not sure what that is. There's the rear swinging arm. That's nicely moulded as well. Some of the small parts are nicely crafted. It looks very nice indeed. Very, very nice. And then you've got the chrome parts. Here you've got the exhaust parts, and they're quite chromy, aren't they? Don't really know how else to put it really, but they're very, very smart. Obviously, one of the tips with adhering chrome parts is that you have to scrape away a tiny bit of the paint that paints the chrome parts chrome to make the glue adhere the chrome parts to the rest of the bike. You can't glue chrome parts that have chrome paint in place. And these are nice parts as well, aren't they? Look at it. I don't want to take this sprue out of the bag. There's also, if I can get it into play, can I turn this around a little bit so you can see? Oh, actually, I might be able to do that by doing that. There we go. You've got the indicator covers there. You see them? And then you've got the transparent parts there as well. And you can see the quality of the transparent parts. They're very good indeed, aren't they? The rear lamp there is nicely frosted. It's really nice. Very impressed with the parts on this kit. And then you've got a little bag with the bits that aren't made of plastic. Got a couple of springs. There they are. 2 rubber tyres, which are good. And there's a piece of vinyl there for the brake cables and everything else. There's even, look at the tread on the tyres. They're beautiful, aren't they? Really impressed. Very, very impressed indeed with the quality of the kit. It's really, really good. So that's the inbox review. What I want to quickly do now is just go through the gumph to give you an idea of what this kit comprises of. The model we're doing an inbox review on today is the Aoshima Yamaha VMAX 1200cc 2007 final version. The model serial number, it's a little bit difficult to understand this, but according to ScaleMates, the serial number is 051658. But on the side of the box and in the instruction leaflet, it clearly says Aoshima number 08. So, yeah. And there's also a prefix number here. That's where they got the 051658 from. But there's also a number here of 2600. So I'm going to go with Aoshima number 08. But ScaleMates do state that the serial number is 051658. The release date of the model was 2016 and the kit is moulded in 1/12 scale. There are decals for a standard Yamaha 1200 VMAX 2007 edition with a custom flame decal on the top of the tank. The dimensions of the model are approximately 8 1/4 inches long by 2.5 inches wide, and it will stand 4.5 inches high on its centre stand. Now there are 96 parts on 6 black plastic sprues, 32 parts on 2 chrome plastic sprues, 6 parts on 1 clear plastic sprue, 2 vulcanized parts, 5 metal parts, and 1 vinyl tube, totaling 142 parts in total. Now, the options and costs are really easy because there's only one company in the world that makes a Yamaha VMAX model in any scale, and that's Aoshima. But they do build 3 distinctly different versions, and they build 3 different iterations of the bikes across all of their different boxings. So Aoshima build a Yamaha VMAX, a Yamaha VMAX Custom, and a Yamaha VMAX Custom Super Trap, all in 1200cc motorcycles, and they're all available for between £25 and £40. The £40 usually includes the postage fees from Japan to anywhere in the world, but the bike is usually available for about 25 quid if you live in Europe. Conclusions. Now, Aoshima are the only boys on the block producing a Yamaha VMAX motorcycle in any scale, and will be my first Aoshima kit and my first motorcycle kit that I will finish, so 2 firsts for me. With no reviews of any sort online, I don't know what the kit is like, but it looks similar to a Tamiya bike kit, and so it should be pretty good. I have seen a number of images of this kit complete, and it does look very, very nice built up. The parts look crisp with good detail, and the rubberized tyres are a really nice touch. I remember one of the things that my brother used to say that he really didn't like, but he persevered and eventually got it right, was the rubber tubing to produce the brake cables and the accelerator cables. And I'm not looking forward to them myself either, but to be honest with you, looking at the instructions, the locating pins are there for you just to cut the pipes to size and push them into place. It doesn't say to glue them in place, it just says to push them in place. If there's any subbers out there that are used to building this style of bike, I would appreciate any tips and hints that you have, because I've never built a bike of this quality before, and I want to try and make as good a job as possible for my friend, so that he can look at this on his mantelpiece and remember the days when he was riding this absolute beast of a bike. One of the things that a lot of subbers might not realise, a lot of model makers might not realise, is that Yamaha built the VMAX not only in a 1200cc bike, but they also released a mammoth 1700cc version of it too. Now, I don't know whether it was just a bored out and lengthened stroke type of engine, or whether it was a completely different engine that they put in, but I do know that the bike ended up being 1696cc and produced about 160 brake horsepower, but it did away with the VMAX boosting system, so you didn't have these big massive throaty pipes above the engine. So yeah, but they did build an even bigger beast than the 1200 variant. So anyway, that's the inbox review. I hope this video has been of some use. If you have any queries, questions, and any of those comments that come in for hints and tips, I would really appreciate them. Any questions, I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for tuning in, boys and girls, because I know there might be a few girls out there as well, and let's face it, they make just as good models as most of us. And I hope all your modelling projects are going really smooth. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye for now.